Okay, so this presentation today, we're going to kind of take our next iteration into data analysis. The material, again, will not be in your Grauer textbook. There is a PDF file attached with this particular lesson, and we're going to look at today quantitative data as opposed to what we were doing before, qualitative data. So quantitative data, we have a bunch of numbers. And we have to first figure out what's going on with these numbers. And I have a table here that comes out of that reference that's in your learning management software. What I just have a bunch of data points here. And so I have some columns and rows. Looks like I have about 20 different data points. And what we're looking at is a survey where we looked at how long it was to do a year-end audit in days. Okay, so if you look in here, we have values from, I think our smallest data point here is 13 and our largest is 33. And if I want to show this information graphically on, say, a column chart, it's not going to make much sense to us. What I would prefer to do is create what's known as classes, or I'll talk about them as buckets, all right? And I think of maybe another example of this. If I'm registering to run a race, I'm going to go over to Spokane and run Bloomsday. One of the check boxes they have there is my age, and they categorize that particular statistic and they award winners. So a lot of people brag about being the tops in their age class. Okay, so there's the class. So your class might be under 12 years old, or you might be in a class 12 to 18 years old, or you might be in on the other end of the spectrum, class 60 years and older. All right, and you say, hey, I finished in the top of my class. That's got merit too. So in that particular example, we create classes and we break up our data based upon class. And I can say, you know what, I did really good. I finished second in my class at Bloomsday. That would be a great achievement. All right. So questions when we do these types of studies: how can we summarize a list of numbers? What can we measure? And where are numerical summaries appropriate? All right. So here's some process here. We're going to take this numeric data as we identified and create some classes. So we have to determine how many classes are we going to have, what's the width of those classes, and then put some limits together. Okay, so I said, like, for instance, 60 years old and older might be one of my limits. All right, or one of my limits might be like 12 to 18 years old. Okay, that's another limit. Okay, and then once I have that, then I can start doing some frequency distribution and relative distribution, and I can chart it. And we've looked at column charts, we looked at pie charts. I'll identify a histogram today, and I'll look at another tool known as an ogive. All right. So we create classes. There's a potential to create too many classes, not enough classes. I'm going to just throw out there some numbers here. And every application is going to vary, but I would think in most applications you look at maybe about 5 or 6 classes, but it's subjective. Another maybe less subjective category is class width. So we could create class width, in other words, how many data points are in each class, by taking our largest data value and subtracting from a smallest data value and then dividing it. If we have 5 classes, divided by 5. All right. But going back to my example for the runners in Bloomsday, we don't necessarily need to go from age 60 to 92. We might want to just go 60 and over, or 12 years old and younger. You know, that's another way to look at classes too. So when we create our class limits, again, there is some subjectivity on how we do that, you know, and we have to really be engaged in our study to understand what we're trying to show. All right, and then the tool, when we get an access here, in Excel, the tool we're going to use, we've looked at the count if statement. We're going to look at the count if S statement. Okay, and that allows me to have to create ranges in there. All right. Now there's also a tool identified in your textbook that is the frequency function. That's an old data function that's really not utilized anymore in Access, or in Excel or Access. I keep referring to Access here, but in Excel. So we want to use that COUNTIF. All right. So let me first, I have a data set here I'm going to work with, and the data set I'm going to import again is coming from a text file. So I go over to data from my external data sources, and I'm going to grab a text file here, and I have this on my desktop. In this assignment, you'll need to download this, and then you'll have to import it. All right, and then I have my import wizard. We've talked before about the different types of file organizations we can have. We really only have one field here, and that's hours in this study. And so I'm not going to worry about delimit it fixed with. I'm just going to hit finish, and I'm going to say just drop it in on that very first cell A1. Okay, so here's my data points, and what I am looking at here is this is based upon the average number of hours a day a person uses a computer. All right, we can quickly scan through a couple data points here. So this particular sample, we found this person was on a computer for 4.1 hours, 3.1, 4.1, 10.8. All right, so an average day, and it looks like we have about 50 data points here. These are how much time a person spends on a computer. All right, so some things I need to know here. One, what's my upper range and what's my lower range? What's my maximum value? What's my minimum value? And this is to help me plan for classes. So I can look through my data points manually, or I can use a temporary, I'll say temporary because I'm going to just find out what the value is here, and then I'm going to probably erase this. So what is my maximum value? And I will select my block of data points. Okay, so my max is going to be 14.8. By the way, take a look at what it did there. Do you see how I'm looking at the range of those cells, or that range of values has been called computer study, which was also the name of the text document that they imported in. Okay, so I have a range on there already, and I can use that, or I can use A1 colon down to A51. Either one will work. So that's the max. Let's look at my min. Okay, min, and I'll use that. Now watch what happens too. This is called IntelliText. Okay, so do you see how I start to type that in, and I get this box here, and one of my values is, it looks like a tag here, is computer study. And I'll kind of double click that in there. All right, and there's my min. Okay, so as I start to look at this, my maximum value is going to be just under 15. My minimum value is, well, I think closest to 0. So I could look at my classes. I'm going to create my classes between, and my ranges are going to fall into, my maximum is going to be 15, my minimum is 0. So if I'm using five classes, that would make each class about 3 units wide. All right. So let's create my different classes here. So I'm going to have one class from 0 to 3. I'll have another class from, and we're in tenths here, so from 3.1 to 6. Now my example, like a lot of examples, is the number's going to work out exact here, but recognize that there needs to be some judgment made in these classes here too, that they're not always going to work out to be perfectly spaced apart. Okay, but mine did for this particular example. All right, so these are the hours spent on a computer. All right, and then over here I want to put together a frequency distribution. Okay, and then over here I will put together a relative. Okay, and those will be the same as what we covered in our last lesson. Okay, so over here, frequency distribution. First, let's clean this up a little bit. I'll put this in a nice, put some grid lines. I need to widen these guys out a little bit, so I'll change my column. Whoop, let me grab all these guys. Column width, I'll make that a little wider. What am I at 8 here? Let's go at 12. And then I need some wrapping of text. And let me center and put a little shade in there. Okay, looks a little better now. Let's figure out frequency here. So my frequency, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start with, actually I'm going to center this too. Equals, and I mentioned the count if s statement. So I say count if s, and I choose my range, my criteria, range, and then my criteria is what my smart text is telling me here. Okay, so my range is going to be, and again, I'm going to just select them all by hand, and then a comma. Now I put my criteria in. By the way, notice once again that rather than show A1 to A51, it just comes in as computer study. My criteria is going to be what? Well, it's got to be greater than, okay, or equal to 3. And that would be everything that is, excuse me, I have that backwards, don't I? It'd be less than or equal to 3. Okay, and I'm going to get an error there. I need to put these in some quotation marks here. And then that should work appropriately. Okay, so my formula again is I say equal if count, or count if s, and then my range of cells, and then what the criteria is. And the criteria with this particular function I have to actually put inside of quotation marks. All right, let me copy and paste that down here, and then I'll save myself a little typing. So for this particular one, my computer study here, I need to be greater than 3. So flip that around. Okay, that will include 3.1. And then I want to add a second parameter. So I say and computer study needs to be, what's my criteria here? Less than or equal to 6. Okay, and I'm going to drag that down and then edit each of these. So computer study here needs to be greater than 6, and then less than or equal to 9. I'll edit this one here, and here we want to go greater than 9 and less than or equal to 12. And this one here, I actually only need to be greater than 12. So I'll remove some of this. And if I did this correctly, I should be able to find out that this should equal 50, because I have 50 data points. And I'll just real quick do a summation of this. So I can do it in my head, and we get 50. Okay, so I think I have solid data there. All right. So now the next thing I want to do, compute a relative distribution here, and I can do a relative distribution by taking this value and divide it by a number of data points I have here. And again, I can do that a couple different ways. One, I could go over and I could use the count. Let's do the count statement, okay, or count function. So I say the count of, and we want to say, what is that, computer study? Okay, let's check that out first. Let's see if count of computer study. I should have 50, right? I do, okay. And this is going to be what? D2. Okay, if I put that together appropriately, and I'll show us as a percent, drag this down. All right, and again, I can sum this if I want to do it, and it should equal 100%. All right, great. Got that half of the exercise done here. And then I can go ahead and I could create a column. Let's do that. Okay, I could create a column, and I could do a pie chart here too. So I'll do a, I'll start with right here. I'll do a quick little column insert, column. We'll do a two-dimensional column, okay? And I want to change some things here real quickly. I could select my data, and I want to edit this, and I want to show, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want to show the different hours. Okay. And over here, instead of frequency, maybe I'll use the, I'll edit this series here, and I will go, instead of frequency, hours on the computer. Okay. All right, so now we have our study here. I'll click OK, and then I'm going to just shrink this down for a time being, because I have a lot of things I want to put on here. All right. And then I could also do the, and I might want to change this a little. I'm just looking at this. I'm not quite sure I'm liking the way this displays. And I have these different chart layouts, and I can, look at these in a number of different ways here. All right, maybe that's more effective. So again, I'll let you use your judgment. What is going to best exemplify my data? Okay. And maybe I'll just stick with that one right there. Here's hours on a computer, and maybe I don't even need a legend there. I'll take that out. and we can look at, all right, there's some data for us. All right, I could do the same thing, and I would choose probably a pie chart for my relative distribution. Okay, let's go on to another one here. Okay, so let's look at some more statistics here, and we're going to look now at cumulative frequencies. Okay, so we have our frequency and our relative frequency. Let's look at a cumulative frequency. Okay, and by doing this, we might answer such questions as 50% of the people in our study used a computer 6 hours or more a day. That might be one conclusion that we come out of it. All right, so let's again try and I'm going to replicate this, copy, paste. All right, I'll take this and I'll just widen this. I think we had these at column width of 12. Okay, and I'm going to delete all my values here. All right, and I'm going to go over here, and what are we looking for? We're not looking for frequency anymore. We're looking for cumulative frequency. And over here, we're not looking at relative distribution. We're looking at cumulative relative distribution. Okay. Actually, we use the word frequency, cumulative frequency. Okay, there we go. All right. Let's play some more here. Now we're going to change the study a little bit, and less than or equal to 3 hours. That's a long data item here. I'm going to stretch that out a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I start looking at how many hours somebody spends on a computer, and we're going to look at the number of people that spend less than or equal to 3 hours. Here we're going to say less than or equal to 6 hours. Use that same format. Actually, the last one would be less than 15 hours. Let's put this at 12 hours. I don't like how I'm saying this. Excuse me, I change this in midstream, but I'll say 6 hours or less. How about that? That might better exemplify what we're trying to do with our data. This would be 3 hours or less. Try and think this through as we go through this exercise. 9 hours or less, 12 hours or less, 15 hours or less. Okay. Now we're not quite so long-winded in our approach here. All right, so now we got to fill a cumulative frequency and then the cumulative relative frequency. So how many people spend 3 hours or less? If we use our conditional, okay, and our criteria is going to be, we'll use our same computer study range, and then our criteria is going to be less than or equal to what? 3. Greater than. Okay, so there's my 6, and I'm going to fill this down, and then I'll do some editing here again, rather type more, and this would be less than or equal to 6, and then this is going to be less than or equal to 9, and this one's going to be less than or equal to 12, and this is going to be basically the whole data set now, less than or equal to 15. Okay. And then we can calculate our cumulative relative frequency, all right? And we can find some mediums here, okay? and we'll look at the tools for this here in just a moment for graphing. But now we're going to take 6 and divide it by 50 is really what we're looking for here. So I could say this would equal this, divide it by that, and I need to make sure that those values are right, and I'll make that an absolute reference and H2 a relative reference, so I'm looking ahead here when I want to fill down. I can do that. My cumulative relative frequency should always, the very last value there should be 100%. Okay, so what portions of the population are we looking at? And really, as I look at these data points now, and if I look at the relative here, I could say that more than half of my study group is on the computer 6 hours or less. Okay, in fact, 2/3. All right, and over here, actually, I could look at this and I get a different value that 27 or closer to half are in somewhere between the 3 to 6 hour range. Okay, and I could look here, I'm over 3/4 of the folks are 9 hours or less, and then the real hardcore is 94, and then everybody's 12, 15 hours. All right. So let's do some charting here again, and I'll grab this information here. We'll insert, and I'm gonna use that. Now I want to create a histogram, all right? And I'll show you the difference between a histogram and a column chart. Okay, first there's no tool for it, so you start with a column chart. Now I'll grab my 2-dimensional column chart. And again, like I've done with some of our other charting, I'll do a little bit of modifying here. And what do I want? I don't want 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for my data points, so I will select some data, I will edit this, and I will choose as my range these guys. Okay, and over here, cumulative frequency, we just say, let me edit this, and I'm going to change this to hours on the computer. Okay, and then maybe I'll get rid of the, click OK here, and get rid of this. Okay, now what I do with a histogram is I need to get these guys so they are, there's no gaps in the, really, a histogram is a bar chart, but officially if we're going to do it, we need to take all these little gaps out of here. Okay, so I'm gonna right click on my plot area. How do we do this again? Click somewhere else here. Let me come back. There it goes. I believe we did a double click on it. Okay. And I get to my format chart, and somewhere in here there is a property. Yeah, I get lost with these. I'm going to pause this. I'll find this. Don't waste your time with it. Okay, so here's where you find it. I click on the series. You notice all of them get highlighted when I do that. And I just click with my left button, and I'm right click here, and I go to Format. And one of the things I'll find here is gap width. Do you see this? And it's under series options, so I could take that gap width, and instead of having a large gap, I'll have no gap. Okay, that gives it a little different look. Okay, but it gives me a little different perspective on things here too, because I could start looking now, and I see there's not much change from here to here. Okay, here there's a big gap. Very few people spend 3 hours less on a computer, but this is my middle area right in here. Okay, and really right in this area here. Okay, there's just little steps here, enormously big step right here. Okay, so that's a histogram, and you got a histogram side by side here with a column chart. Okay, let's do our last little tool here, which is known as an ogive. Okay, and ogive, what I'm doing is it's a linear graph. Go back over here, my insert, and I'll show you my last our last task here. So I'm going to grab a 2-dimensional line graph. Okay, really that's what I use for my ogive. Okay, but I'm gonna change my data. I grabbed the wrong data set here. I want to grab, let me Myself a little room here. Getting kind of crowded. I have this thing magnified pretty good here. You'll have more room on yours. But with an ogive, I actually want to show my frequency, not as percentages, but just as actual raw numbers. Okay. All right. So I'll select my data, and well, actually, I could do it right from here. I don't have to redo this thing. So I'll just select my data, and I'm going to change my data values to these guys. Okay, that way I don't have to redo it. And then I can change my tags here again. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can do something like use these. Okay. And then rather than series 1, I can edit and say hours on the computer. And maybe I got some redundancy here, so I'll finish this off. Get rid of that. What else can we do with this? Now we can also, I believe we can, I'm just going to click on these. I believe we can change, there's a way you can change this. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I can change the direction from, okay, I might want to change this to stacked or rotate them slightly. Okay, you see what I did there? I rotated my text at a little different direction. And I don't know if that's, and I'm not super happy with that. I'll hit it again here. Okay, so I select, and I right click, and I go format, and where are we at? We access options. I got all these aligned. Okay, so I could change these, and we'll go back to horizontal. Okay. Kind of same story here. Oh, by the way, look at this. Why doesn't this start at 0? It starts right here, kind of in the middle. Again, I got lots of granular controls here. And actually, I'm going to use my layout tab. And I believe my axis. And this is my primary vertical axis. Is at 0? Okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys explore this a little more. Okay, so you go through this, and maybe you want to put that down so it starts at 0 rather than midway up there. Okay. And I can clean this up a little bit. Maybe I'll put hours on the computer there. I don't want to overlay any of this stuff. Okay. I'll put my ogive down there. I actually would have room here if I wanted to do a bar, some sort of, or pie chart to show my relative distribution here. But that's an ogive. Okay. Here's what's known as a histogram. And the last part I have you do with all these exercises is please give me a summary. Tell me something interesting about this. You worked hard. You got something going here. And I'm going to move this here, move this down here. And what's your conclusion? All right, you did all this. We got this lots of numbers and stats and stuff. So grab a text box. I'll just pop one in there. And then tell me something, what's going on here. So I could say, I always say this. When I say 2/3 of our sample group are on computer, what do we got here? 6 hours or less. All right, so somebody can look now and actually make some sense out of this, this data I have. And again, I can spend a lot of time formatting this, and maybe I even want to take, let's use one more tool here, one more drawing tool, and I want to grab an arrow, and I'll go from, you know, maybe this to that. Okay, so somebody can actually link this differently here. Okay. Oh yeah. Now I see what you did. You know, I get that aha moment maybe with this a little bit. Lastly, I like to print this probably. I bet you if I went to a print right now, let's do that. Let me go Control. So print. You see I'm cut off here. Okay, and I don't really need my data set over here, so I will Let me go back out of that. And what do I have for a tool to help me out with this? I have a page layout, and I can choose a print area. So I'll clear my print area, and I will select a print area. Okay, and that's what I want to print. I think I go over to I, don't I? I have to go back up. Yeah, I go up to I. All right, and now I can go, so I'll set that. It's my print area. Set it. And I'll go use Control P here, and am I on one page? Yeah, I'm on one page, but it looks like I might be cutting some things off here. I can zoom if I want. Okay, so I'm cutting a little bit of that off, so I will adjust that by making my margins really narrow. Okay, so maybe that'll help me, or maybe I need to widen it out. But anyways, I think that's pretty good shot right there. All right, so that wraps up, and this kind of recognizes kind of lengthy discussion, but I thought it would be helpful to all of you with the lack of maybe a whole lot of detail in your textbook as you go through assignments dealing with quantitative data sets.